Well, dear Steffi Czerny and Lisa Buddha, if you are somewhere in the crowd, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for having me, and I really appreciate the loud music when you walk on stage. I think I keep this in mind for next public events and stages. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, as introduced, I'm a politician, so I try to link the discussions we just heard. The two I had a little bit the chance to listen to, the ones of Andrew McAfee, who's coming after this, how much have I? 13 minutes talk back on stage and will interview me, and the last one, which I heard with the left ear when I got the microphone about my head behind the scene, but try to frame it into a broader picture, as I'm not only Minister for Economic Affairs and Climate Action, but also someone who's trying to understand the horizon and the society in which development is happening, to better give answers for the right political decisions. And if you are asking me what is the backdrop behind all the different crises and conflicts we are facing, is there a story behind all the stories that are troubling our lives and make our days so difficult and sometimes dark? I would say yes, there is one. From my point of view, we are facing a major conflict, and this is the conflict between liberal democracy and freedom and authoritarian regimes and powers. And we are facing this conflict by an attack from without. Russia's aggression against Ukraine is, from my point of view, not basically a war about the Donbass, the territory. This is part of it, of course, some neo-imperialistic approach which we haven't seen the past 80 years in Europe. We have developed a peace order where we agreed on that troops cannot shift borders away, but we hold the diplomacy to solve the disputes that may occur between countries or people. But basically, it's not about territory. It's about the idea and the fight of the Ukrainian people for freedom, for the life of the European people. We in Europe, in Central, East and West Europe, hold as a normal life, which is not, of course, if you look at the bloody history of Europe. And this is the demand of Ukraine, to decide about their society themselves, not by some foreign rulers and not by kleptocratic government, by themselves. It's the people who make the difference and who are asking and fighting for their freedom. And Putin, with everything he has in mind, one thing I'm sure he cannot accept, that the former center territory of the Soviet Union can be part of a liberal democracy, of a united Europe where liberal democracy rules. So therefore, I think that this horrible war with his hundreds of thousands of dead is basically a war against democracy, against freedom, liberal democracy. Therefore, I think this is the best reason why we have to stand in solidarity with Ukraine, but also for our own well-understood self-interest. Secondly, you see this rise of authoritarian, maybe totalitarian, populistic powers everywhere in the Western Hemisphere, I would say worldwide. And obviously it has nothing to do with the form of the government, the democratic government. You see, we had a traffic light coalition in Germany I am part of the rest of the traffic light. You can see maybe now it's a traffic light for well, we lost the yellow actually, but there are still there are some traffic lights without yellow, so it's only red and green. But no, but I would always argue we were successful with the work we have done, but very disappointing with the appearance and the attitude we developed. So of course I understand that the disappointment with the government is part of the debate in Germany. But you see, we have a rise of populism and right-wing extremists everywhere in Europe, also in countries which haven't had a traffic light coalition. And we see the founding countries of the European Union, the new countries, and it's in North Europe, it's in South Europe, and it's in the US, and it's everywhere. It's also in South America. So obviously it has nothing to do with the one problematic situation one country may face or not, but we see it almost everywhere in countries where we thought that liberal democracy is a fixed and decided political institution or political system. And I have to remind us, the lefties, the Greens and the Conservatives, the family of the Democrats, I would say, that liberal Democrats always tend to think they are in a higher moral position, and therefore never can think that the enemies of liberal democracies will be successful. Because we tend to think this is impossible, this cannot be the course of history, because we have the higher moral ground. So we always tend to, the liberal Democrats always tend to underestimate the power of the enemies of democracy. But you see there's a push also from inside in the democracy, so there must be a problem in the democracies themselves, a structural problem. I'll come to this in a minute. And the third one, as I'm a member of the Green Party, I just have to mention the pressure, I would say the pressure on freedom is also coming from climate change. This is not only a physical problem. The German Constitutional Court once decided 4 years ago that we must, the now acting politicians, we must defend what? The freedom of the coming generations. So they forced the then ruling government in Germany to do more for climate action because it is about freedom. So we talk always about saving the climate. Actually, we're not saving the climate, and the climate does not need any saver. The climate is just the climate 2 degrees or 4 degrees or 6 degrees warmer. It's then the warmer climate. The climate needs no help. We defending freedom and human life and liberal democracies by fighting global warming. That is the third threat to freedom, just from my point of view. But I would like to come back to the first two. The first two problems, and now bring it back to the debate of this day and this conference, which means, of course, that I have in mind, and I think you are aware of it, that the causes for populism and the success of authoritarian regimes might be also different causes. Social injustice, for example. I'm not going into this right now. But the thing that is striking, and I think is very much related with this day's conference and the political debate and maybe the German election, is that I call it now, just to make it brief, authoritarian politicians seem to be more successful economically, also with regard to the liberal democracies. I give you it's obvious what I'm talking about. Look at China. Nobody could argue that this is a liberal democracy, and with high power, they are pushing into the markets of the future. Not only about the climate technology, solar panels, batteries, electric vehicles, and so on and so forth, but also in the field of digitalization. They're using all the data they can collect in China, but also elsewhere, which is a problem, I'm coming to this in a moment, by increasing the next generation of artificial intelligence and getting more market access by this. But it's an authoritarian regime, the communistic party ruling, they can't be voted away. It's an authoritarian example for a successful economy. Of course, I know they have their problems, and the last year was the weakest economic year in China ever, but still the development is very, very, very strong in China. And look at the other side of the Atlantic, the US, I think you have it, everyone has it in mind. It's the tech billionaires now, they're using the money, Elon Musk and now Mark Zuckerberg, to develop the next generations, and it's going on and it's going forth. And maybe also social media, for example, Facebook and X, of course, on the other side, TikTok, have a problematic structure in itself. You know how the algorithms work. They are always concentrating on engagement, and engagement is higher by bringing the worst of people into action. So it's not about compromise, better understanding, finding common ground. It's about they are wrong, they are idiots, we know better. It's about hate speech, it's about being aggressive. This is, of course, not freedom. So I would say the liberal Democrats must be very careful just by the names that are given. From my point of view, freedom does not mean that everything is allowed. Freedom means that we, the people, decide about the rules that are forming or shaping our lives. Freedom equal anarchy is a vulgar understanding of freedom. So therefore you see that rules deciding about the rules that are forming or focusing on our lives, that is the important question. Who is deciding about the rules? And then you see that there is a problem also in the liberal democracy on the American side. If only few people have the power and have the money and deciding about the rules, maybe about the rules of communication, then the rules of information, then they decide about the rules a society is acting to. So you see there's a problem also on the other side. Coming to the economic figures, Germany, only 84 million people, has a trade surplus with the US of 60-something billion euros. Every year. And we had difficult years in Germany. The last 2 years we had a very weak economy, mainly due to the loss of Russian gas and the high energy prices. So, well, this is another story, of course, but that Putin could wage a war on Ukraine could never be a surprise in 2022. If you look to 2014 back, everything was plain as night to be seen that this is a political threat that was written there. Maybe, of course, it's not a security that Putin would be so aggressive against Ukraine, but the risk was always there. But Germany and the former German governments, they forced the country into a gas dependency from Russia, which we paid a very, very high price in the past 3 or 2 years. So we had a weak economy, but still I'm pointing to that our surplus increased in these years of weak economy against the US, coming from 49 billion trade surplus in 21 to 60-something in 2023, in 2022 and 2023. So you see that we are still a strong economic country, only 84 million people, being the third largest economy. But basically the goods we have sold are the goods of the 20th century. There, Europe and Germany in Europe had a leading role, a world leading role, of course. Unfortunately, since 25 years, we're not living in the 20th century, but in the 21st century. And that is the problem. Now look into the figures that are invested in artificial intelligence. And I think that was part of the gap that Andrew mentioned when he delivered his keynote speech. The US is now investing, last year I think it was 60 billion, the amount of the surplus of trade only Germany had with the US. And when Donald Trump becomes president, I think this trade surplus will be part of the problems, or maybe the things he's going to change, or he will address to at least. But 60 billion are spent in artificial intelligence development in the US last year. In 2023, and now it's 80 last year. So you see it's going up. In Europe altogether, combined with Great Britain, which is not part of the European Union anymore, but I need some help that our figures are not so minimum. Oh, my time is up, but I need 2 more minutes. Please give me that to understand where I'm looking to and what I want to deliver as a message. It might be 10, maybe 12 or 15 billion. Now, we heard in the discussion before that in Germany, we have a fine startup scene in the beginning. More companies are founded in Germany. We had a rise of 11% last year. More people are employed in startups than ever. So this is developing okay, I would say. Of course, always we can do better. But when it comes to the scale-up phase, then the venture capital is missing. Of course, it's hard enough to find venture capital for startups, so risky in a way companies in itself. But in Germany and in Europe, the private sector is very, very risk averse. Some companies are lucky that because they find investors from outside, especially from America, which means, of course, that the revenue of successful companies goes where? Well, to America. And this is, of course, happening also with the investments in America and in artificial intelligence, that out of the 60 billion, 80 billion, now it will become 100 and 120 billion in the next years. And on the other side, in Europe and in Germany, maybe from 12 or 15, wherever we stand, it might become 17 and 18 and maybe 20 and 25, but the gap is broadening. And that is true. So coming back now, not talking too long, to my key question, how do we defend liberal democracy, knowing that the gap is broadening and that the ones who are owning and developing the technique are having the power? First of communication, then maybe of influence, and maybe in the end also political power. We can't complain. We, the Europeans, sorry, Andre, I know you're an American, we can't complain about the others. We have to do better. We have to straighten the back. We have to develop an attitude not playing only not to lose, but playing to win. That means a lot of reforms. Less bureaucracy, more venture capital, the government and also the official structures as an anchor customer who are willing to invest or asking the companies to invest. Also thinking about a new or forgotten combination about military research and civil research, which we have divided in Germany and in Europe due to our history. But now facing where we are standing, I'm now talking about Germany and Europe, but I mean the liberal democracies are losing the race for technique. Who is developing what? Who has the ownership, the patents, and the knowledge about the technique? Then we will lose the race to fight for liberal democracy and to save the freedom of the people also for future generations. That's basically my point and my approach. And now back to the concrete points. Thank you very much for having me.